So, I've just discovered yesterday that I've completely ruined almost half of my family's vacation photos and almost all photos from my daughter's birthday. So, I must have taken around 500 photos for the whole vacation, and almost half of those photos are blurry, right? In some photos, my wife is blurry, in some photos, my daughter is blurry, and in some photos, the background, the beauty of that place is just blurred out. So in this video, I will talk about three main reasons why you get blurry photos and how you can avoid them or fix them if you get them anyways, right? I just want to make sure you don't land in the same situation as I am. And ruining your family's vacation is not an ideal situation, and obviously these are memories which won't come back, like my daughter's birthday. Anyways, please like the video if you find it helpful in the end, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. And yeah, let's get started. Now, the first reason why you get blurry photos is due to camera shake. Now, I know it sounds very obvious and probably too simple, but this is true. Camera shake is probably one of the biggest reasons for getting blurry photos. So, what is camera shake? Our hands shake all the time. Sometimes we don't notice it, but our camera does, especially at lowest shutter speeds. So, for example, just try to take a casual photo with your phone or camera and make sure that you have a lower shutter speed. You will see that you get some blur in your photos all the time. Because your hands are shaking, so does your camera, and so you get a bit of a blur in your photos. Now, there are different ways how you can avoid getting blurry photos due to camera shake, and one of them is to hold the camera properly. Now, if you are using a camera like this, you can bring your left hand below the lens and support it. Then you can bring your right hand over the camera grip and use your index finger and put it over the shutter to take photos. Now you can bring your elbows here closer to the body. Now I'm using my body as a stable platform, and I'm supporting the camera also. Also, my left hand is now acting as a human tripod for the lens. So this position removes almost all types of motion blur and camera shake from the photos. That is coming from my body, obviously. Now, this becomes even easier if you are taking photos from a phone instead of a camera. You can simply hold your phone like this, and your little fingers should act as a stable platform for the photos, like this. Now, you can see that the index finger of my left or right hand is placed over the shutter, like this, right? And again, bring your elbows closer to your body. So this again gives you a very stable platform and removes almost all type of camera shake and movements from your body. Now the next thing that you can do is simply invest in a gimbal or tripod. Now I would really recommend getting yourself a tripod because it simply gives you a very stable platform and automatically removes almost all types of blur in your photos. Now, you don't have to buy something very expensive. It can simply be something that can support your camera properly because your camera should not fall. If you still have any doubts on which tripod to buy, you can simply check the description of this video and check out the tripod that I am using, and maybe that will give you an idea. Now, even if your camera is on a stable platform, you can still get some blur while taking the photo itself. So let's say you press the shutter button of your camera too hard or you tap the phone too hard. This will introduce some blur in your photos because yes, your camera will shake when you press it hard, right? So in order to avoid this, we sometimes use self timer. So just start a timer for let's say 5 seconds or 10 seconds, and this will wait out the camera shake introduced due to pressing the shutter button, and in the end you will get a photo which almost never has any blur in it. Now if you have followed all these three things and you still get some blur, it's time to use the shutter speed rule. The shutter speed rule states that if you're using a prime lens, your shutter speed should be a minimum of 1 over your focal length. And if you're using a zoom lens, then it should be a minimum of 1 over double of your focal length. So for example, if you're shooting with a 50 mm prime, then your shutter speed should be a minimum of 1 over 50. And if you are shooting with a zoom lens, say let's say 18 to 55 mm, and you are at 35 mm, for example, then your shutter speed should be 1 over twice of 35, which is 1 over 70. Following this rule will help you avoid a lot of blur in your photos coming due to different reasons like, camera shake or a movement of the subject or whatsoever, right? Now, camera shake is not the only reason why you are getting blurry photos. You can also get it by using wrong autofocus modes. So, what is autofocus? Autofocus means you are letting the camera decide where to focus in a scene. There are two autofocus modes, and people usually use them for the wrong purposes. So, let's clear that. The first mode is AFS or single point autofocus. This is mainly for still subjects and it locks down on still subjects when the subject is not moving in a scene. The second mode is called AFC or continuous autofocus. In this mode, the camera usually tracks a moving subject and locks the focus on this. This means even if your subject is moving, the camera has it in focus and still you can get a sharp image, right? So if you are using AFC or continuous autofocus for a still subject, you will get a blurred out photo. Similarly, if you are using AFS or single point autofocus for a moving subject, you will still get a blurred out photo because you will not be able to lock in on the moving subject properly. So it's very important to understand the autofocus modes and use them for the right purposes. Now this is all good, but the camera is not always right though. When we are letting the camera decide where to focus, we are also letting it decide what the subject is. This means that you might think that you are taking a photo of your family, but the camera finds the background more important and that is a subject for the camera. So in the end, when you take a photo, your family is completely blurred out and the background is in focus instead. And we don't want that. That photo has no value for us. So how can we fix that? You can avoid this by simply not using the autofocus mode and using the manual mode instead. By using the manual mode, we can simply set the focus points by ourselves and we can directly put the focus points on the subjects for our scene, right? This is one of the best ways to avoid blur in your photos. Now, one pro tip for using autofocus is that you should always half press your shutter before taking the full shot because this will allow the camera to focus and lock in on the subject for that moment. This will make sure that you will always have a sharp photo with the subject in focus always and you will almost never get any blur. And lastly, try taking photos in burst mode. This will give you at least one or two photos which are in focus and sharp, right? So you will not miss the moment. Now at this point, you might think you are all set. You have the perfect tripod, you know how to hold a camera properly like a professional. You also have complete knowledge of manual or autofocus modes. You also know the situations in which you should use AFS or AFC. So you should not be getting any blur in your photos now. But you do. You still get some blur. Probably you are still getting a lot of blur. Now is probably the best time to understand shutter speed and how to use it effectively. Now, slower shutter speeds take in much more light, right? Because the shutter is open for a long time. This means it also allows us to capture movements of subjects. So you should always use slower shutter speeds if you want to capture light trails of cars or flow of water, for example. Now, on the opposite, if you want to freeze a motion, then you should go for faster shutter speeds. Now, this depends on the subject. The faster your subject is, the faster your shutter speed should be. Now, I have created a cheat sheet for you. This sheet tells you what kind of shutter speeds to use for what type of subjects. And this is going to be on the screen in 3 seconds, so you can take a quick screenshot. Now, one pro tip is that you should always use a tripod when you are shooting with a slower shutter speed. Otherwise, you will always see blur in your photos. Now, let's suppose you don't want to capture emotion and you don't want to freeze emotion either. You just want to take a casual photo, right? And there are only some people walking and your subject can be your family or whatever. Then what shutter speed should you use? In that case, you should always follow the shutter speed rule that we just discussed before. Again, to recap, If you're using a prime lens, then your shutter speed should be 1 over your focal length. And if you're using a zoom lens, then your shutter speed should be 1 over twice of your focal length, right? But never ever go below 1 by 30. In my experience, if you go below 1 by 30, you will see a lot of blur due to camera shake. And obviously, if you go below 1 by 15 or 1 by 10, then without a tripod, it's just a mess, right? All right, so this is it. Now you know why you get blurry photos and how you can avoid them, right? By the way, can you tell me in the comments below if you found yourself in similar situation like I am, or am I the only one? I'm interested to know about your experiences. I really do hope that you can avoid getting blurry photos of yourself or your family. I don't know how much photos I can recover, but let's see. I hope you enjoy yourself and keep shooting, keep taking photos. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.